You know, life has a funny way of delivering its biggest lessons wrapped in the most painful packages. For me, that package arrived in the form of my only child, Lila. She slid a crumpled pair of hundreds across the cold, gleaming marble counter. Her eyes, once so full of innocent wonder, now as hard and unforgiving as polished stone. "Take this and go die somewhere else, Mom," she said, her voice dripping with venom I barely recognized. "The house is mine now." Can you imagine? Just 3 days earlier, I was her loving mother, her confidant, her biggest fan. But $33 million earlier, to be precise, something inside her had irrevocably shifted. I walked out of that house with little more than a grocery bag stuffed with clothes, my heart feeling like it had been ripped from my chest and stomped on. It was a pain so profound it stole the very air from my lungs. But here's the kicker, the part she never, ever saw coming. When her glittering, fragile world inevitably collapsed around her, she came crawling back, begging. And I, her supposedly disposable mother, had one last crucial lesson in betrayal and resilience to teach her. We were, to all outward appearances, the quintessential American dream family. People used to stop us on the street, genuinely remarking that we looked like the picture-perfect family from a magazine spread, or, as I often joked, the photo that comes inside a picture frame, ready to be replaced. I married Daniel Young, a quiet, steady civil engineer who possessed an almost magical knack for making money grow, much like a seasoned farmer coaxes tomatoes to climb their intricate wire trellises. He was my rock, my anchor. Together we had Lila, our bright, vivacious daughter, and we poured every ounce of our love, our resources, and our dreams into her. We invested in her passions, from grueling violin lessons to engaging Mandarin tutors, and enrolled her in the best allergy-free summer camps money could buy. We wanted her to experience the world, to be well-rounded, to be truly exceptional. Every night at dinner, Daniel would ask a question that became a cornerstone of our family philosophy. "What did you learn today that the world needs?" We weren't trying to raise a genius, not exactly. But we wanted her to feel safe, yes. But more importantly, to feel capable and purposeful, never spoiled. We firmly believed that our financial success should translate into freedom for her, not entitlement. And we maintained one ironclad rule between us, a silent vow we lived by. Respect is non-negotiable. It was the bedrock of our home, the invisible force holding us together. We simply never imagined, not in our wildest nightmares, that we would ever have to formalize that rule to actually write it down, legally, into a will. Whoever thinks their child would turn on them? Life, as they say, comes at you fast. Daniel, my strong, vibrant Daniel, started feeling winded on walks he used to conquer uphill without breaking a sweat. It began subtly, a slight cough, a lingering fatigue, easily dismissed as age or overwork. But soon, the whispers became shouts. The diagnosis arrived like a guillotine blade dropping swiftly and silently. Aggressive lung disease. The doctors gave him 18 months if we were lucky. My world, our world, instantly shattered. I remember holding him in the kitchen that night, the scent of his favorite coffee still lingering in the air, tears streaming down our faces as we tried to make sense of the unthinkable. We made a plan, a desperate, heart-wrenching plan, not just for his remaining time, but for my future, and for Lila's. Our attorney, a kind man who had seen us through everything from minor property disputes to complex business dealings, drew up a revocable living trust. It was a meticulously crafted document, designed to protect everything we had painstakingly built. $33 million in assets, our beloved family home, paid off decades ago, 2 rental properties that provided a steady income, a robust portfolio of index funds, and Daniel's cherished coin collection, a legacy passed down from his father who brought it with him from Lisbon. But the true heart of that document, the clause that would echo through our lives, was Clause 9A. It read, in stark, unambiguous legal language, any beneficiary who evicts or financially deserts the surviving spouse forfeits all inheritance, which reverts in full to said spouse. I remember Daniel squeezing my hand, his eyes filled with a mixture of love and a profound, heartbreaking pragmatism. "She'll never need it," he murmured, his voice hoarse, "but we'll give her the chance to prove it." I hated that sentence, the mere suggestion of betrayal. And yet, in the same breath, I loved it, for it was his final, powerful act of protection. We tucked the paperwork into the safe, a silent, weighty gesture, much like parents tuck careful stitches into a cherished quilt, hoping to mend something before it's ever torn. We hoped it would be nothing more than a formality, a testament to our enduring love, not a weapon. Daniel died on a Tuesday, a gray, melancholic day that smelled distinctly of wet leaves and unspoken grief. The funeral was small, intimate, just close friends and family. But even in my profound sorrow, I couldn't help but notice Lila. She wore oversized black designer sunglasses, obscuring her eyes, and spent a significant portion of the service on her phone, posting a picture of herself, tears carefully art-directed with the caption, "Orphan Vibes." I was too numb, too utterly broken, to process the sheer insensitivity of it then. My grief was a heavy cloak, muffling everything else. A week later, still adrift in a fog of sorrow, we sat in the lawyer's conference room. It was a sterile, impersonal space, all polished wood and hushed tones. There was Lila, me, 2 attorneys, and a box of tissues nobody touched, as if acknowledging grief would somehow disrupt the solemnity of the proceedings. The lawyer, a man with a perpetually serious expression, cleared his throat and began to read the numbers. $33.4 million after estate taxes. The sheer magnitude of the sum seemed to hang in the air, a heavy golden presence. Lila's perfectly manicured fingers began to drum a restless tattoo on the table, her impatience palpable. She leaned forward, her voice surprisingly sharp, asking if she could access funds immediately. The lawyer, ever polite but firm, explained the intricacies of the trust, detailing how it allowed for a monthly stipend and lump sum distributions at the trustee's discretion, but only for reasonable support. Lila rolled her eyes, a gesture so dismissive, so utterly disrespectful, that I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach. I sat there quietly, a silent observer, thinking how much Daniel, with his unwavering belief in humility and grace, would have absolutely detested that eye roll. It was a small gesture, but it spoke volumes. The first truly blaring siren went off 2 nights later. I found her in Daniel's study, a room that still held the faint scent of his pipe tobacco and old books, with a realtor and a photographer. They were staging the house, my home, for sale. My heart hammered against my ribs. "Mom," she chirped, her voice falsely sweet, a saccharine tone I recognized from her childhood when she was trying to get away with something. "You'll just move to the condo in Scottsdale. The sun is so good for your joints." Scottsdale? I had never, not once, expressed even a passing interest in Scottsdale. It was a place I associated with retirement communities and endless golf courses, neither of which appealed to me in the slightest. The realtor, a young woman with kind eyes, looked visibly embarrassed, shifting her weight from foot to foot. I reminded Lila, my voice trembling slightly but firm, that the house was half mine, legally, until probate officially closed. She merely laughed, a short, dismissive sound that grated on my nerves. "No, Mom, you're mistaken. The trust owns it now, and frankly, the trustee works for me." The implication was clear. My rights, my wishes, meant absolutely nothing. The next morning, a massive moving truck idled ominously outside our home, its engine rumbling like a predator. My boxes were only half packed, my life still in disarray, when I finally called our lawyer, a desperate tremor in my voice. He moved swiftly, filing an injunction before lunch. By dinner, the truck was gone, a temporary victory perhaps. But something far less replaceable was gone too, the last vestiges of trust, the lingering hope that my daughter still saw me as her mother, not merely an inconvenient obstacle. The official notice arrived not with a knock at the door or a formal delivery, but folded neatly under my coffee cup one morning. It was a cold, calculated gesture, designed to inflict maximum emotional damage. 30 days to vacate. The reason, stated in stark bureaucratic language, renovation for asset maximization. Lila, it turned out, had wasted no time. She had already hired a property management firm that specialized in flipping inherited homes, turning grief into profit with ruthless efficiency. The notice felt like a physical blow, stealing my breath. I walked upstairs, my steps heavy, a dull ache spreading through my chest. Every single photo of me holding her as a baby, every cherished memory captured in a frame, had been removed from the walls. In their place were cold, impersonal renderings of white sectional couches and minimalist decor, visions of a future house that held no place for me. I tried to talk to her, to reason, to appeal to any lingering shred of humanity. She answered me through earbuds, her eyes distant, focused on something only she could hear. "I can't hear broke people," she said, her voice syrupy sweet, oozing with contempt. The words hit me with the force of a physical punch. I felt my chest implode, a sharp, searing pain, much like Daniel's lungs must have felt in his final days. But even through the haze of hurt and disbelief, a mantra began to form in my mind, a lifeline I clung to. Clause 9A, Clause 9A. Just breathe. Just remember the clause. It was my only hope. Day 29 arrived with a cruel finality. I left the house that had been my home for decades, the house where I had raised my daughter, with just 2 suitcases and a yellow envelope. The envelope, slipped under my door by some anonymous hand, contained $200. For gas, the note tersely stated. It was a paltry sum, a final humiliating insult. I drove until exhaustion set in, eventually pulling into a motel by the interstate, a faceless, transient place that charged $49 a night. It felt like rock bottom. The room was sterile, impersonal, smelling faintly of stale cigarette smoke and desperation. I showered wearing flip-flops, a pathetic attempt at hygiene in a place that felt inherently unclean. My meals consisted of instant oatmeal, eaten slowly, mindlessly, while staring at the peeling wallpaper. Mornings were spent at the local public library, a sanctuary of quiet, and more importantly, free Wi-Fi, which felt as essential as oxygen. One afternoon, lying on the saggy motel bed, staring up at the perpetually whirring ceiling fan, a profound, chilling realization washed over me. I had, somehow, raised a child who could weaponize money with the same destructive force that drunks swing bottles in a bar fight. It was a bitter pill to swallow. But then, Daniel's last words to me alone, whispered in his final moments, echoed in my mind, cutting through the despair. If she ever forgets who she is, remind her gently first, then fiercely. Gentle had clearly, painfully, failed. It was time for fierce. It was time to fight. My journey into fierceness began with Mr. Kwan, a forensic accountant whose business card was a masterpiece of understated aggression. Families fixed, frauds fried. He was a small, unassuming man with sharp eyes that missed nothing, and a quiet intensity that was both comforting and intimidating. We met in the library's quiet study room, a place of hushed whispers and turning pages, as he scrolled through property records and financial statements on 2 humming laptops. He worked with a methodical precision that was both terrifying and reassuring. Within a week, he laid out a series of colorful flowcharts and spreadsheets that painted a damning picture. Lila had already listed the rental properties on Zillow, accepting cash offers with alarming speed. The proceeds, he explained, had been cleverly parked in a new LLC, or limited liability company, with her boyfriend, a man I barely knew, listed as co-manager. But the most galling discovery was her request for an immediate distribution from the trust, citing a fabricated medical emergency, anxiety of all things. The trustee, perhaps swayed by her performance or simply overwhelmed, had granted her $50,000. My daughter, the same sensitive soul who once cried genuine tears when ladybugs accidentally found their way inside the house, was now committing wire fraud and embezzlement with the casual ease of ordering sushi from a menu. It was beyond belief, yet the evidence was irrefutable. The next strategic move was swift and decisive. Kwan and I met our attorney at a coffee shop that smelled intensely of burnt caramel and simmering revenge. The air was thick with purpose. We filed for an ex-parte asset freeze, a legal maneuver that allows a court to issue an order without notifying the other party, first arguing a clear breach of fiduciary duty and a blatant violation of the trust's specific spendthrift language. This language, our attorney explained, was designed to prevent beneficiaries from squandering assets, ensuring long-term financial stability rather than immediate, reckless spending. The judge, a formidable woman about my age, with her reading glasses perched like a tiara on her head, listened intently. Her expression was unreadable, but her decision was swift. She granted the freeze within 4 hours. The legal system for once moved with astonishing speed. Banks locked accounts, title companies received immediate notices, and Lila's boyfriend's ostentatious Tesla, a symbol of their ill-gotten gains, was unceremoniously towed from the valet stand at a trendy rooftop bar. That night, Lila's Instagram story featured a tear-streaked selfie, her face contorted in a dramatic pout, captioned, "When the world hates an icon." For a fleeting moment, a ghost of my old self, I almost felt a pang of guilt, a flicker of maternal concern. Almost. But then I remembered the cold marble counter, the crumpled hundreds, and the venomous words, and the feeling vanished, replaced by a steely resolve. 3 days after the freeze, a frantic pounding on my motel room door jolted me awake, just as the sun was painting the sky in soft hues of orange and pink. It was Lila. She stood there in designer sweatpants, crumpled and stained, no purse. Her hair a wild, tangled mess, as if she had yanked it repeatedly while screaming into a pillow. "Mom," she choked out, her voice raw. "We need to talk." She used the word "we" as if it could still exist between us, as if the chasm she had created hadn't swallowed us whole. I stepped outside onto the concrete balcony. The air was crisp, but the concrete felt colder, sharper than the morning breeze. She launched into a desperate plea, begging me to release her money. She swore that buyers for the properties were backing out, threatening lawsuits, and that her life was crumbling. "Do you even know how embarrassing it is to decline a yacht purchase, Mom?" she sobbed, tears finally flowing freely down her face, leaving tracks in the grime. I listened, my mind drifting back to countless nights I had rocked her through colic, her tiny, fragile body nestled against mine. I remembered the fierce, unconditional love that had defined our early years. But the past was the past. I looked at her, my voice steady despite the tremor in my heart. I told her I loved her, a truth that still held, but that I would not, under any circumstances, sign anything until the courts decided. She left screaming, her words echoing down the motel corridor, accusing me of killing her future, of being a cruel, heartless monster. A week later, a barrage of texts started appearing on my phone, their tone shifting from accusatory to apologetic, then outright pleading. "Could we meet for lunch, my choice?" one read. I chose a diner, a neutral ground, with chipped mugs and laminated menus, the kind of place where nobody judged and the coffee was always hot. She arrived, looking a little less disheveled, but with a legal pad clutched tightly in her trembling hands. It was filled with questions. How to budget, how trusts actually work, how to apologize, if that's what I need to make this right. Her hands trembled visibly as she spoke, her eyes darting around the diner. I saw fear there, yes, but also a calculating glint. a desperate attempt to regain control. Halfway through our hash browns, I slid a folded contract across the checkered tabletop. It wasn't a punitive document, not exactly, but a roadmap to redemption, drafted with the help of my attorney. It outlined 3 clear conditions: voluntary dismissal of her petition to evict me, repayment of the $50,000 she had fraudulently taken from the trust, and a written agreement to cohabit the family home respectfully until probate finalized. She stared at it, her eyes wide, as if I had asked her to slice off a finger. "I'm your daughter," she whispered, her voice barely audible, a childish plea. "Yes," I said, my voice firm, unwavering. "And I am your mother, not your safety net with an on-off switch. My love isn't a blank check for bad behavior." It was a hard truth, but one she desperately needed to hear. She stormed out, leaving the contract behind on the sticky diner table like so much trash. Her fury, barely contained, erupted online that night. She posted a video rant, her face blotchy and tear-streaked, railing against toxic mothers who use money to control. The comment section, predictably, lit up like a Christmas tree, filled with strangers eagerly calling me vile, a monster, a cruel woman. My phone buzzed incessantly with notifications, but by then, I had stopped trying to win the internet. The digital noise felt distant, irrelevant. I slept 9 hours straight that night, a deep, restorative sleep I hadn't experienced in months. I had detached myself from the public spectacle, from her manufactured outrage. Instead, Mr. Kwan kept digging, quietly, relentlessly, like a bloodhound on a scent. He uncovered an email thread that sent a fresh jolt of cold dread through me. It was between Lila and her boyfriend, discussing ways to circumvent the trust. The phrase "old bat one to know till it is too late" glowed on my screen in neon-like clarity, a chilling testament to their malicious intent. They were discussing forging my signature to remove the spendthrift clause to gain unfettered access to the remaining millions. It was a clear, undeniable attempt at fraud and elder abuse. That was the line. I forwarded everything, every damning piece of evidence, to the district attorney's elder abuse unit. A strange, almost serene calm settled over me. I felt the way soldiers must feel when they finally sight the enemy's artillery, not pointed at them, but away, signaling a crucial turning point in the battle. The tide was turning. I had braced myself for a slow, agonizing legal crawl, a drawn-out battle in the bureaucratic labyrinth of the courts. But greed, it turns out, accelerates everything, pushing people to make desperate, foolish mistakes. Lila, blinded by her desire for quick cash, made her biggest blunder yet. She tried to sell Daniel's cherished coin collection, the one inherited from his father, to a private buyer for cash, completely bypassing the trust's protocols. Luckily, the buyer wasn't just any collector. He was a seasoned numismatist, a man who recognized the provenance and historical significance of Daniel's collection. He noticed the trustee's name listed on the insurance papers and, with a collector's ethical integrity, called him. The trustee, alarmed, immediately contacted our lawyer. Our lawyer, in turn, called the sheriffs. They arrested her, not in some back alley, but in the opulent lobby of the Ritz-Carlton, where she had booked a lavish suite to celebrate the anticipated sale. The charges were severe: attempted grand theft, fraudulent conversion of trust assets, and elder abuse, a particularly stinging charge given that the coins were technically mine while I was alive, and she was attempting to defraud me. I watched the security footage later. A chilling, silent movie played out on a small screen. Her manicured hands being cuffed, the casual indifference of onlookers sipping their lattes. The camera caught her eyes, wide with shock and terror, scanning the room, desperately searching for me, expecting rescue. But I wasn't there. I couldn't be. She used her single phone call on me. Collect. The familiar voice, now reedy and desperate, crackled through the line. "Mom, please, I can't stay here," she pleaded, her voice breaking. "People in here are crazy. I pictured her at 9 years old, afraid of thunder, hiding under my bed, her small hand clutching mine. The memory was a sharp, painful contrast to the woman now on the other end of the line. My heart ached, a familiar maternal pang, but my resolve remained. I told her, my voice as steady as I could make it, that I loved her. But I also told her, with a conviction forged in pain and betrayal, that I would not post bail. Sometimes, I said, the words carefully chosen, love means letting you feel consequences so you remember you have a soul. The line went silent for a moment. Then she hung up, the sharp click of the dial tone sounding like a heavy door slamming shut on an entire era of my life. It was over. The coddling, the enabling, the blind maternal devotion. All of it was finally, irrevocably over. That evening, I walked out of the sterile motel, leaving behind the ghosts of my recent past. I checked into a quiet Airbnb by the river, a small, cozy place with a porch overlooking the water. I cooked a simple meal of salmon, watched the evening news, and for the first time since Daniel's funeral, I slept without nightmares. The silence was deafening, but it was a peaceful silence. Months crawled by, marked by endless legal filings and hushed consultations. Her attorney, a savvy public defender, pushed hard for a plea deal: restitution, probation, and permanent removal as a trust beneficiary. The district attorney, however, was pushing for jail time, seeing a clear case of fraud and elder abuse. It was a difficult stalemate. I knew I had a voice in this, a crucial perspective. I submitted a victim impact letter, not filled with anger or demands for harsh punishment, but with a nuanced plea for rehabilitation. I stated that I would support a deal that included mandatory mental health counseling, comprehensive financial literacy classes, and a substantial 10 years probation. I signed it simply, but profoundly. Her mother forever. The judge, recognizing the genuine intent behind my words, accepted the recommendation. She added a crucial element, however: 90 days in county jail as a dose of gravity, a necessary period of reflection and accountability. I did not attend the sentencing. I felt I had said everything I needed to say, both in my letter and through my actions. A few days later, I mailed her a well-worn paperback copy of The Millionaire Next Door, a book Daniel and I had often discussed. Inside, I tucked a small handwritten note. Page 127 might help you start over. She never replied, but I knew, deep down, that the seed had been planted. With the asset freeze finally lifted, the trustee released funds for my living expenses and, thankfully, the considerable legal costs I had incurred. The old family home, once a symbol of our perfect facade, held too many painful memories. I didn't return. Instead, I bought a small, sun-drenched cottage nestled by a winding country road, its garden filled with fruit trees, whose branches tangled together like children's drawings. It felt like a fresh start, a canvas for a new chapter. I enrolled in a pottery class, discovering a surprising joy in the tactile process of shaping clay. The kiln's heat, the earthy smell, the quiet focus. It was therapeutic. I adopted a senior rescue dog, a scruffy, sweet beagle mix named Maple, who snores like an old man and demands endless belly rubs. Some mornings, the grief for Daniel still washes over me, and I cry. But the tears feel different now. They are quiet, private tears. Not the public spectacle I had once feared. Not tears that anyone could monetize or exploit. Daniel's ashes sit on a bookshelf in my cozy living room, next to a vibrant green cactus. I talk to him sometimes, about the soil in my garden, the glazes on my pottery, the way the sunrise now feels like a promise of new beginnings, not a crushing debt of sorrow. 1 year after that bleak motel night, a familiar, tentative knock sounded at my cottage door. It was Lila. She stood there, a stark contrast to her former self, dressed in a plain hoodie, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, her nails bitten down to the quick. Probation required her to find stable work, to prove she could be a functional member of society. She had lost everything, not just the money, but the illusion of her former life. And in its place, she had found something unexpected. Humility. She asked, her voice barely a whisper, if she could stay just a week. We sat on my small porch swing, the afternoon sun warm on our faces, while Maple, ever the curious one, sniffed cautiously at her worn sneakers. I looked at her, truly looked at her, and saw a flicker of the girl I once knew. I told her she could sleep in the sunroom, but under 3 non-negotiable conditions: weekly therapy, verified by her probation officer, employment within 30 days, and absolutely no social media posts about our life, our relationship, or her struggles. She nodded, her eyes fixed on the weathered floorboards, a quiet acceptance in her demeanor. That night, I heard her crying through the wall, a soft, heartbroken sound. It reminded me of a baby, not a spoiled, entitled adult, but a small child who had finally learned, with profound sadness, that the world is a much bigger, much harsher place than they ever imagined. She stayed not for a week, but for 2 months. Our days fell into a quiet, almost domestic rhythm. Mornings, she'd diligently fill out job applications, her brow furrowed in concentration. Afternoons, she'd help me weed the garden, her hands, once so carefully manicured, now stained with earth. One day, as we knelt side by side, pulling stubborn dandelions, she asked, her voice small, "Mom, do you hate me?" I paused, wiping dirt from my hands. "Hate," I told her, looking her squarely in the eye, "is just love that's been burned. And burns, Lila, they heal. They truly do, if you stop pouring gasoline on them." I then handed her the first statement from the restructured trust, a document outlining her new reality. It detailed a modest monthly allowance strictly tied to proof of employment, and the remainder of the inheritance a fraction of the original fortune, to be dispersed at age 40, and only if there were no further violations of the trust's terms. She stared at the numbers, her eyes wide, the sheer scale of the reduction clearly hitting her. "I thought you'd leave me nothing," she murmured, her voice laced with a raw vulnerability I hadn't heard in years. "I'm leaving you the chance," I answered, my voice soft but firm, "to build something that truly belongs to you, not to your ego, not to some fleeting illusion of grandeur." She lunged forward, hugging me fiercely, her body shaking with silent sobs. I felt the fragile little girl bones inside her adult body, and in that moment, a vivid memory flashed through my mind. The day she learned to ride her bike, how she'd looked back over her shoulder, her face a mixture of terror and triumph just to make sure I was still holding the seat. I wasn't holding it anymore, not in the same way. But I was still there. And that, I realized, was the most important lesson of all. Life, as it always does, continued to unfold. Lila found an entry-level job at a local greenhouse, starting from the bottom, tending to seedlings and bagging soil. To her own surprise, she was good at it. She discovered she genuinely liked the smell of dirt under her fingernails, the quiet satisfaction of nurturing life. Within a few months, she was promoted to assistant manager, a testament to her newfound work ethic. I started selling my pottery at Saturday markets, and she, with her surprisingly artistic eye, began designing beautiful minimalist labels for my pots. We are not the perfect family photo anymore, not the glossy magazine image we once projected. But we sit on that same porch each evening, Maple snoring contentedly at our feet. And sometimes, we even laugh about the sheer absurdity of yacht dreams and instant millions. The $33 million still sits in diversified accounts, enough for comfort, for security, but no longer a cage, no longer a weapon. And in a remarkable turn, we even set up a donor-advised fund for foster kids aging out of care. She presents the grants now, her voice steady, confident, filled with a genuine empathy I never thought I'd hear. Watching her, truly watching her, I finally understand. Revenge, I've learned, isn't a dish best served cold. It's a garden you replant after a wildfire, carefully tending to the scorched earth until something new, something beautiful, learns how to grow. If this story, my story, rattled something loose inside you, if it sparked a flicker of recognition or a wave of emotion, then hit that like button. Tell me in the comments below, what would you have done differently? What choices would you have made? Subscribe for more real-life family dramas, where justice in its own unexpected ways finds a path. And share this with anyone who needs reminding that money can buy a lot of things, a whole lot of things, but it can never, ever buy a conscience. Remember this, the best inheritance you can ever leave your kids isn't millions in a bank account. It is the values, the resilience, the unwavering sense of self that keeps them human when those zeros start showing up. I'm living proof that you can lose everything, absolutely everything, and still have exactly what you need to start over, to build something even stronger.